Hello and welcome to this video, and this video is going to be almost like a podcast or a radio type of thing where you're not really going to see many graphics on the screen, but I'm going to talk about what I think we need to do to save Long Island, to save New York, some of my ideas. I've been thinking about this for a couple of days and talking about various things and what we need to do to protect Long Island, protect our environment, make it fair again, and get rid of the corruption. Obviously. So where do we start? Well, we are going to start with the environment first and foremost, of course, and that is especially the Pine Barrens. And we easily need to, the first thing we do is halt all development. No more destruction of natural areas. So it would be illegal. It doesn't matter whether it's privately owned or publicly owned. It would be illegal to clear trees or vegetation from any land that's been in its natural state for more than 5 years, right? So if land has been left in a natural state for at least 5 years or more, it will now be illegal to touch that land. And if there's vegetation on it, natural vegetation, whether it be grasslands or forests or pine barrens or whatever, all right. And this would stop a lot of these developments from occurring. And the developers will probably try to intimidate and sue, but we pass the law. We get it done, and we save what's left. All right, and there will be no more development. The development needs to be confined to areas that need it, around downtowns, rundown areas, and stuff like that need to be redeveloped. So that's one thing we can do to save our environment. And then the next thing, of course, is climate change. How are we going to combat climate change? And I know I'm talking about this on a Long Island standpoint and not maybe as a New York standpoint, because we are part of New York. And these are rules that need to be passed in all of New York, because New York, a lot of areas in New York are under threat of development. So make that a state law for New York, that you have a preservation law that states that any land that's in its natural state cannot be disturbed. All right, that becomes a state law. All right. New York State law number 2. We need to phase out the use of combustion engines in this state, right? I think I would say by 2025, we need to have made combustion engines on all private vehicles illegal, all right? There will be no more gasoline combustion engines in this state, all right? The only combustion engines that will still be around are those that will be used on buses, and we'll work on that already. There are already electric buses out there. We already have we've got to work on electrifying a lot of the diesel parts of the Long Island Railroad and Metro North, so we can phase out the use of combustion engines. All right. In the meantime, before 2025 comes, we need to look into making the ownership of gas-guzzling private vehicles extremely expensive. All right, I think we need to place a $500 annual fee on any vehicle that gets less than 20 miles a gallon city. So if you're driving a vehicle that gets less than 20 miles an hour city, we need to pass a law, and this should have been passed instead of congestion pricing. I feel congestion pricing was a mistake. And it's going to backfire. It's going to be bad. All right. It's not fair at all. All right. Instead of congestion pricing, we should have looked at a statewide tax on gas guzzling vehicles to fund the MTA. So if you're driving a vehicle that gets less than 20 miles an hour, it's a personal vehicle. You're just driving it because it looks cool. You don't need it. You're not a business. This would not apply to commercial vehicles. It's only private vehicles. If you have a vehicle that gets less than 20 miles per gallon, you will have to pay a $500 tax on that vehicle. All right, maybe it's a little extreme. Maybe it could be $100. We ramp it up as the years go by. So maybe it'll start off $100 and then work its way up to $500. All right, that tax keeps getting higher and higher. All right, and we need to shift away from fossil fuels in this state. We need to pass our own version of the Green New Deal. All right, that's one part of it. The second part of it is we need to rebuild all the mass transit in the state, and New York needs a statewide mass transportation system. The MTA needs to run public transportation in the entire state of New York. All right, every single county, every single town in this state will have access to public transportation, whether that be bus or rail or ferry even. But every part of this state needs to have access to public transportation, and a law would be passed mandating that every resident of this state within 1 mile in a relatively developed area, I would say, any area with at least a suburban population density, has access to mass transit within 1 mile of their residence. All right, so we need to provide new bus routes. We need to provide new trains. There are a lot of tracks that are used by freight that could be used by mass transit, so we need to look into that. We need to think about these things because this is going to get people out of their vehicles and out of their carbon lifestyle. And of course, all these electric cars, all these electric trains are going to need electricity. And then we look at electricity generation. Well, we need to put solar panels in all the parking lots in the state. All right, all the state parks, all the state-owned buildings. We need to give tax credits to businesses that choose to put solar panels in their parking lot. So if you're a business, let's say you're a mall like Roosevelt Field, all right, if you decide to put solar panels in your parking lots and on top of the mall, you'll get a huge tax credit in return for that, all right? So if you're doing the right thing and doing the right thing for the environment, you're going to get a huge tax credit, all right? And I think that way we could have a lot of generation from solar, but I don't think solar is going to do everything. I think we need to keep nuclear going too, and me and a lot of other environmentalists don't agree with this. I do think we need to think about building new nuclear power plants, and at least keep Indian Point running, right? Nuclear is going to still be an important part of power generation. It produces very little carbon emissions. It's true, you do have the nuclear waste, but it's much more efficient than burning natural gas, which is what most non-nuclear power plants do other than the wind and the solar. And we also need to look into wind power, offshore wind power. Also, we need to get that. So we've got to move away from the combustion. We got to move away from the combustion of fossil fuels. We've got to move away from the cutting down of our forests. Trees, breathe carbon dioxide and emit oxygen. So the more trees we save, the more we can stop climate change in this state. All right, and I also think maybe there are areas that needs to be reforested. Maybe areas that may be abandoned. There's a lot of abandoned properties in this state that are in the middle of nowhere. Let's replant the trees. Let's get some more trees there. Well, of course, native trees, obviously. So that's how I feel New York can take the right steps when it comes to the environment. And the statewide public transportation will include, like in New York City. Now, right now, if you want to take a train from New York City to Albany, it's very expensive. But the MTA needs to take that over. We need to make it affordable. There are buses, but again, a train is much more efficient than a bus. So we need to improve the train service. The tracks are already there. All right? And like I said, we couldn't electrify it in the long run, but in the meantime, maybe 2025, maybe a little aggressive, maybe 2030. But I'd say within 10 years should be a reasonable amount of time that we can not have any more combustion engines in the state anymore, anywhere. All right? We need to move toward that goal, And maybe there are locomotives that can run on electric that have batteries in them, instead of burning diesel. We need to look into that, all right? We do need to look into that. And we need to electrify. I think the Long Island Railroad needs to be electrified to Port Jeff. I think the Oyster Bay branch needs to be electrified. I think the Central branch needs to be electrified. I also think maybe even the Greenport line needs to be electrified, at least to Riverhead. And the Montauk branch needs to be electrified, at least to Spionk. All right, so that's what we need to have, all that electrification. On Metro North, electrification on Metro North it goes to a much greater extent than on the Long Island Railroad, obviously. But that's the only electrified railroads in the state. Unfortunately, if you want to go to Albany, you have to. It's a diesel. It uses a dual mode, but it's going to Penn, but it's mostly diesel along the way, and that's a problem. We need to think about electrifying, but it's all part of when you come to in the nation and the country as a whole. We need a national rail network. That's part of the Green New Deal. All right, so that is how I feel about the environment. So I'm going to spend 10 minutes on each topic on this podcast. So that was what I think New York State needs to do about the environment and mass transit. Well, mass transit is next. It sort of ties into it, but we'll say what does the state need to do with mass transit. It does tie into it, so I guess that'll be considered part of the environment segment, because we've spoken about how we need to improve bus service, we need to improve rail service. We need to think about, even there are, a lot of places have electric buses. We can think about electric buses instead of combustion engines, so that's better for the environment as well. So environment, mass transit, that's what we spoke about in the next 10 minutes. Now, in the next 10 minutes, we're going to talk about economics. What does the state need to do about its economic situation? Because right now, particularly on Long Island, there's a lot of favoritism going toward areas where there's a lot of white finance professionals, and it's mainly on the South Shore. They're getting all the investment from all the businesses, which is foolish because climate change is coming. And when it comes to climate change and how we're going to adapt to climate change, how is the state, because we can do what we can, but the climate is still going to change. How are we going to adapt to that? Well, one of the ways we have to adapt to that is face the fact that the South Shore is going to flood, and stop pouring loads of money into these projects on the South Shore, whether it be these fancy renovations in Merrick and Belmar, which were completely unnecessary and a complete waste of money. Complete waste of money. All right, that money should have been used on the main line in the middle of the island. So we need to think about how we're going to improve our infrastructure in the middle of the island. Stop paying attention to the South Shore. Middle of the island, we need to update our electric grid, and we need to find out why the businesses won't come to the middle of the island. Why are they looking at there's a lot of corruption that we're going to have to get rid of, and that's the hard part. Wall Street doesn't want you to realize what they're doing, but we need to, I think when it comes to that, a lot of it has to do with campaign finance reform. And I think we need to make campaign finance reform. We need to make campaign contributions. We need to actually limit the amount of campaign contributions from one organization or one person that they can give to a candidate. Right? So this would stop the influence of Wall Street, which on both sides of the aisle, Democrats and Republicans, Wall Street and the real estate and the finance sector, they own most of our state government. Most of the elected officials in our state are controlled by them, and that's why we can't get true equality. And so once we get that out of the way, and the corruption out of the way, we can get more businesses coming to the middle of the island and revitalizing the towns in the middle of the island. We also need to make segregation illegal. You can't. No community has the right to say that a certain group can't live there. Particularly, these people on the South Shore, they only want to live with their own kind. They don't want disabled people living there. And that's got to stop. We've got to start prosecuting cases of discrimination. And we need to really look at what's going on with the real estate and make sure everybody's being treated fairly, because right now that's not what's happening. All right. People are going to have to learn to live together, especially as we have less available land on Long Island as the sea level rises. People are going to have to live together, and we're going to have to do it in the middle of the island because the South Shore is going to be flooded. All right. And bring back our towns. How do we bring back our towns? How do we get businesses to come in the towns? Only we give them tax breaks, but I think a lot of it has to do with the manipulation by the real estate. If you're a business and you're a bank, for instance, you're a business getting started, the bank may not give you the loan if you want to open in the middle of the island. They may only do it if you're willing to open on the South Shore. So that's the kind of nonsense we need to get rid of. All right. When it comes to the schools, school districts, Long Island has, I think, over 100 school districts. We need to merge most of these school districts into, I think Long Island should only have maybe 5 school districts or 6 school districts, all right? Nassau, I think, should only have 2 school districts. I think there should only be a school district for the northern half and the southern half, and that's it, all right? Or maybe just a whole county-wide school district. Let's just make it a county-wide school district. 1 school district for all of Nassau County. So imagine if you did that. The school taxes are a big problem when it comes to taxes and the affordability. And this ties into economy because the taxes are people can't afford to pay the taxes. They're too high. All right, and the largest part of the tax bill that most homeowners have to pay on Long Island is for school taxes. And this is because we have all these school districts, each with their own administrators that have to be paid. All right, but imagine if we got rid of all that and just had one set of administrators for the whole county, merged into one county-wide school district. it would make a huge difference, and the school taxes would go down. And along with that, so would the discrimination, because the discrimination and the segregation, the school districts, are a big thing when people move to Long Island. And nobody wants to live in a school district that's not nice, like Westbury, for instance, all right, or Hempstead, and so it hurts the community, all right. Nobody's going to want to live in those places because the schools are horrible, it's dangerous, and but if we merge all the school districts, then maybe more people will be willing to live there, and maybe we would be able to finally desegregate things on Long Island. Like I said, we are going to have to learn to live together. Black, white, brown, Asian, whatever. We have to live together. Disabled, seniors, professionals, non-professionals, blue collar, we all have to live together. We got to cut this segregation out because it doesn't work. It's not a sustainable way of a society to function. All right? So by getting rid of merging the school districts, we can get rid of lower those taxes quite a bit, make Long Island affordable again for people. And yes, property values may go down, but that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. Our property is overpriced right now. It's inflated because that's what Wall Street and real estate want. By getting the home prices down, Long Island becomes affordable once again, and people don't have to be forced to leave Long Island because they can't afford to buy a home. All right, that stops. The taxes go down. The segregation goes down. Suffolk would probably have 2 school districts, or maybe 3, because I know Suffolk is a larger county. Probably 1 for West, 1 for Central, and 1 for East. All right, for Suffolk County. But we need to merge these school districts once for all. All right, it's got to be done. It's got to be done. The school districts are a big problem. They're a big problem. And then we move on to the law. What do we need to do to make it safe in New York again? And merging school districts could, again, apply to the whole state. But if you do go upstate, the school districts are a lot larger. Upstate in New York, it's a lot cheaper to live. But again, the economy upstate is in bad shape, and there needs to be more investment there too. That also, upstate is high and dry. It will be safe from the sea level rise. So we need to think about investing more in upstate. There are a lot of cities upstate that have a lot of vacancies, so we need to invest in those places. Because that's where people are going to have to live as the climate changes. Parts of New York City are going to go underwater too. But anyway, getting back to my other point about the law. What are we going to do about the law in this state? Because right now we have complete lawlessness. We have a governor that does not care, a mayor that does not care, and county officials that do not care about the vagrancy and the crime that's happening in the city every day. People are getting attacked by these marauding vagrants that are hanging around the city. A lot of them are mentally ill. A lot of them have criminal records. These are people that should not be on the street, but they are on the street because the policy is let them be. That's the facade. Let them be until they attack someone. And then when they attack someone, they go to jail for a little bit, and then they go right back out again. And that's the problem. And closing Rikers is not a solution. In fact, I think we need to build more jails. Rikers should be actually expanded. Can actually expand it. They can actually have like little floating jails around it. But as far as Long Island goes, Long Island needs new jails. Nassau only has 1 jail. Suffolk, I think, only has 2 jails. All right, so we need to think about expanding the jails that we have already. As far as Nassau's case, Nassau is a small county, but I think that jail needs to be expanded a little bit, and maybe they need to modernize it, make a bigger building on the same site where the jail is already, because that's a good site, but they need to make a bigger building there so it can house more inmates, and so it's more modern, because it's not very modern. As far as Suffolk goes, they could do a similar type of thing. We need the excuses we don't have enough jail space. Well, these criminals need to be in jail. All right, and if you commit 3 violent crimes in this state, the way I see it, you should never be let out of jail. All right, whether that's a robbery, whether that's assault, if it's a violent crime that inflicts harm to another human being, if you've done that 3 times, you never get out. You stay in there forever for the rest of your life. All right, that's a good enough incentive to maybe stop people from committing so much crime in the first place. All right. There are a lot of people out there, a lot of these vagrants, that need help. And they're not getting help. They're just getting ignored. Because they know they're caught in the vicious cycle of drug abuse and substance abuse. And there are no consequences for it. Nobody's interrupting that vicious cycle because the police aren't allowed to step in. But the police need to get these people off the streets. I'm not saying, all right, let's just throw all the bums, the homeless people in jail. That's not a solution. We need to find out what's wrong, why they're homeless, and treat them for it, whether that be institutionalized, hospitalization, drug program. They need to go to a program. They can't be out on the streets. They need to be rehabilitated. Right? We can't have people living on the streets. It's not acceptable in this state. All right? It's not acceptable. And that would make people safer. And when it comes to immigration, I feel that those here illegally should be deported, particularly if they have a criminal, if they've committed any kind of crime at all. They need to be out. If you're not a citizen and you commit a crime, you need to be out. That's it. Out. Deported. I don't care if it's just peeing on someone's lawn. All right? I don't care. You need to be out, because generally somebody who commits one crime is likely to commit other crimes. All right? When it comes to gangs, needs to be zero tolerance with that. Gangs should be labeled terrorist organizations. MS-13, all these gangs, they're actually terrorists. They terrorize communities. What makes them any different than Al-Qaeda? What makes them any different than ISIS? They're terrorists. There's no difference. They're out to kill people. They're out to control people. That's what they're out, and that's why they need to be outlawed, all right? And when it comes to people that are members of MS-13, I do not feel that they should go before a regular criminal court. I think they should be treated as terrorists and go before a military court and jailed under high security, top security jail, and then deported. But these gangs need to be outlawed. They are terrorist organizations. We need to get these gangs off our streets. We have to do it. We have to do it. But again, we have a lot of corruption. So these are some of the things I've spoken about that we can fix New York, fix Long Island, fix our environment, fix our mass transit, fix our infrastructure, fix our economy, fix our law enforcement that we need to do. All right? And people will say, well, people will often, intimidate or, those who speak out against it. And, that's the other thing. Cyberbullying is a crime, and this state doesn't do a damn thing about it. Anyone who goes and harasses people should face the consequences. All right? If you're harassing somebody and somebody asks you, please stop, and you keep harassing them, that should be a crime, and you should go to jail for that. All right? It's that simple. All right? But again, we don't have law and order in this state. We have a lot of corruption. We have a lot of entrenched Wall Street real estate. It's like almost like a three-way thing between Wall Street real estate, the banks, to they think they're above the law. And that I believe that there are certain profits that Wall Street gets that aren't even taxed. Well, we need to change that too. All right? Everything Wall Street makes should be taxed. All right? It's not fair that the burden be shifted to the working class people because Wall Street isn't paying its fair share, and they are not paying their fair share, and that needs to change. But in order for these things to happen, people really have to wake up. And I think a lot of people, I go out and people are just so involved in their own lives, they don't see the big picture. And I think because I am mentally ill, because I have a mental problem in my brain, I see things other people don't see. Most people just don't see that. When you look at the people that speak out against these things and bring up these subjects, we're a little different, all right? Because our brains are wired differently, and I think most people are just sheeple. They don't see this. They only think about making money because they're programmed. Society has programmed them to think about only money. And this is a big problem that we need to overcome. In order for us to take back our state, our county, our towns, our world our country from this corruption, people need to wake up. And people need to start. We need to keep speaking out. Those of us who are different, we are the voice. We are the ones who are going to save the world. All right? It's not Wall Street. It's not the celebrities. It's going to be those of us who are different. And maybe we don't have jobs. Maybe we can't work. Maybe we have something wrong in our brains. But our voice is just as important as anyone else's voice. What we say should be considered. And people need to wake up, open their eyes, see what's going on, and say, maybe that guy is right. I am seeing more homeless around. I am seeing more degradation in certain communities. I am seeing discrimination. I am seeing our environment and the weather change. I mean, there are people out there that don't really believe in climate change. They're not seeing what's going on. And they'll point out, well, there was a record of 92 at LaGuardia or whatever, but they don't see that it's warmer. The averages are getting warmer and warmer, and they also don't see the fact that the humidity, it's not so much that it's getting that much warmer in New York, it's getting a lot more humid. And that is due to the warmer oceans because of climate change. And I believe, and I'll say it, I've said it before and I'll say it again, climate change and global warming are the biggest risks to humanity right now. And the biggest risks, especially to us here in New York, because we have a lot of coastline. We have a lot of low-lying areas. We have a lot of people that are going to be affected by climate change, whether that's going to be the rising sea levels as the glaciers melt, or due to the impact of more and more tropical storms and hurricanes due to the warmer than normal oceans and the jet stream patterns. So, for the people listening to this video, I want you to listen to what I've had to say here, because I'm not endorsing any particular candidate at all. But what I'm saying is, we need people in our government that represent the people. And in order to take back our government, we have to cut the cycle of corruption. We have to pass campaign finance reform. We have to make it so individuals and businesses cannot contribute more than a certain amount of money to a particular candidate. All right? Right now we have a system where we have these big lobbying groups. Wall Street is probably one of the biggest ones, lobbying our government and controlling our government right now. And by not letting them have that power over people anymore, we can take back our government. But we have to do these things. We have to take back our country. And I want it to be peaceful. All right? I want it to be peaceful. I see what's going on in other countries with violence, and we do not need that here. We have to make it peaceful. But I worry, as the time goes by, we are heading toward a class warfare. And that's not what we need in this country. So this is why people need to wake up and see what's going on, turn off the auto-tune music, forget about all that designer clothing, get your head out of your Apple or product or iPhone or whatever, and open your eyes and see what's going on. We have a situation where we have a group of people connected with the banks, Wall Street, the finance sector, that are out to ruin everything. They want total control. They want total control. We're going to have to deal with all the problems. We're going to have to deal with our environment destroyed. We're going to have to deal with the crime. We're going to have to deal with all the problems while they live in their little enclave separated from all of this. That's not something we want to see in this country or this state. So we have to speak up. We have to talk about it. And hopefully, maybe I can inspire even more people here on YouTube to speak up about these problems that are going on. Because we can't be quiet. We can't afford to be quiet. We have to stand up and face the enemy. We have to stand. That's a line from a song called Invincible by Pat Benatar, which is actually one of my favorite Pat Benatar songs. But we can't afford to sit and be quiet. We have to speak up. We have to take a stand. I love America. I love Long Island. I love New York State. It's still a beautiful place. But we could lose it all if this cycle of corruption continues. Anyway, I want to thank you for watching this video. Take it easy.